They clearly did not want that. I mean, just by their tone, everything, they pretty much just told us no. They were interested in a 2-year lease. And Matt, I'll tell you, we've grilled Rob over this back here multiple times, multiple meetings, and the guy's story has never changed one time. Don Webb, is that correct?
Yeah, and let's remember the structure of our city government, our council, and the role of the city manager. This council isn't to be negotiating with the administration
Correct.
From Montgomery County. We have
Even
our
if they think they
CEO,
can do a better job.
we have our lead staff person, Rob, down there to do the negotiating. And in meeting after meeting, in executive session back here, because let's face it, we're talking about the possible sale of city property. So it was a proper executive session. And in that executive session, this council gave Rob the direction to go down and do each of the things he's done. He went down there with a sale price, which they refused. He went back to them and asked them what they wanted, and they looked at him and said, well, what do you want? What can you offer? Give us some options. And until we would know, we as a council, we would know what those directives are, what they really want to do with the court building. How can Rob go down there and negotiate anything? Because if it is a short-term lease, then this council has to look at the best interest of the taxpayers of the city and say, okay, if they're only going to be here for 2 years and they're out of here, maybe it's better for us to make some moves on that building for ourselves.
Or save $140,000 in rental expenses over the next 2 years.
But if their goal is no, we need a little time to sort things out. We just gave that to them with this short-term lease to get us through December, and but they need to move on it. They need to move or get off of the proverbial pot,
Right.
because we need to know what to do with that building. And Rob will take his direction from this council that will tell him, okay, that's not acceptable to us, or that is acceptable to us. And by council, that's the people in the community. That's not acceptable to the people of this community to be put off for 2 years while the county decides, we're going to see what we're going to do with that building. And I don't think we might want to. Can you just kind of keep extending our lease for a little? We can't negotiate that way. Obviously, it's got to be a negotiation of, if you're here for the long term, we're here for the long term, and the lease rates and the lease terms will accommodate that. But if you're telling us that you're not sure and you're not willing to commit to anything and you're asking us, I can only tell you that from a commercial standpoint, there's not a commercial realtor in town who's going to lease a building under those terms. Maybe my department store is going to stay in your shopping center, maybe not. Kind of just do 2 years instead of a 10-year.
Right.
And the two people leading this charge, that our city manager is not a good negotiator. All were gung-ho with the directives that Rob was given. So every piece of negotiating tools that we gave Rob, and numbers and dollars and whatever information we gave him, they weren't back here screaming, oh no, don't do that. To think a lot of this is not political.
Matt, you know.
I know there's politics, and I'm trying. I love politics. I'm trying to figure out what's going on. I have disagreements with some of the things that you guys decide on. I have disagreements with probably everybody that has sat on that council, and they probably disagree with some of the things I say. It is what it is. Politics in this city.
You aggravate the shit out of me sometimes. That doesn't mean I don't like you.
Well, I appreciate that.
Yeah,
I'm sure
I
can do that.
The shit out of you, but the fact we can sit down, look, and throughout all this, and I got to go. My wife's yelling at me. Throughout all this, I would expect you to discuss and talk about all of this through with an open lens and the idea of fairness behind it. there isn't anything I've said tonight that's not 100% factual.
This audio recording, and just so you get it, this is what will be released. I will not edit anything out of this. This will be what's
and I'll say it's to the listeners. There's nothing that's been said that wasn't true, and I hope everybody has an open lens to see a lot of this for what it is. And quite frankly, if they're upset about the lease itself and the surroundings of that and the court possibly moving, well, guess what? Everybody in this county, in this city, just voted for Carolyn Rice, who was the treasurer that oversaw an $18 million deficit at the county, and those 3 commissioners just raised our sales tax. And now they want to spend money to build a new court building when we have one sitting right back here.
I just have 2 quick things, and then I appreciate the time.
So you folks should be upset and mad and storming the county building as well.
I will definitely be going to the county building to ask questions, the same as I've done with Mr. Shaw, with you guys. Mr. Morgan made mention to prepping ourselves, and I pick out little things like this a lot. And it's just to understand in my weird way of thinking. He made mention of prepping ourselves for negotiations. Is that something that you guys have met with him on to prep? Did that mean anything, or is that just as a whole, council needs to prep for this negotiation?
So I didn't pick that up. So so I'm just being honest. If I didn't pick that up, then I would say. So to answer your question, as of right now, no, I have not met with Councilman Morgan about this court lease. I haven't met with any council member about this court lease. So no. So if I didn't pick that up, I'm assuming, and I don't want to put words in Seth's mouth, but I didn't pick that up. So I would assume he's just talking in generalities.
And the last quick thing, and folks are going to point this out because it kind of irritated me too. Tonight, during that discussion, Mr. Otto had his hand up, and you skipped over him, and you're allowed to call whoever you want. I understand that. You're the presiding officer. Why wasn't he able to speak on that discussion? Why was it moved so quickly to the votes?
So in talking to Tony, there was a motion made. Nancy had seconded that motion, so I dealt with that motion, and I guess my own personal feeling about that is I knew the discussion that had just taken place back here. I probably could have seen where that discussion was going out there. And again, to keep us off the 6 o'clock news, the motion to end the debate, especially because the discussion on the table wasn't about personnel issues, right? We weren't out there discussing Rob's ability to negotiate.
Okay.
The motion and the legislation that was before us was to extend the lease. And that's what Seth's motion was, to vote on the legislation and end the debate, and that was Nancy's second.
Something that was brought up.
So I could have called on Mr. Otto, but I didn't believe that Mr. Otto's discussion dealt with the lease. I believed his discussion dealt with the performance of the city manager, and that wasn't the agenda item in front of us.
Something that was brought up that I looked up out there is Robert's Rules of Order. And in the Rules of Council on Section 4, it's under motion. And it talks that council will follow Robert's Rules of Order. So why was it advised that, no, that's not what we did?
Honestly, I was surprised to hear Tony say that, because typically in Robert's Rules of Order is how we go about it. And to my understanding, that was the motion of the debate, was the motion to vote on the legislation to extend the lease and through the end of the year, and to end the debate. I don't believe Glenn's discussion involved the extension of the lease based on discussions in executive session. I believe Glenn's discussion wanted to be more about the performance of the city manager, and that wasn't the proper place to have that discussion. So I called on Nancy to second the motion, And once a motion has been and seconded, then we call the roll.
Call the roll.
So, I mean, it wasn't, it is, I've been put in positions before as the mayor where the order that someone's called on, or when we're having discussions, people might not like to hear that, but it does come down to the order that I see fit to keep the meeting flowing. And I felt like any more discussion around the performance of the city manager was not prudent at the time, because that's not what the item, it's not what the motion was.
Is there anything else you guys would like to say before we end this recording?
I get why people are frustrated. There are things that people say. I read things that people say. I get frustrated by things that people say. I get frustrated by things people don't say. I've seen several times people talk about and mention, well, city council doesn't listen. And I'm being honest, it's hard for me to hear, because it seems like the people who continually say that council isn't listening, I get their frustration, but it is a group of people representative of that, let's just call it that group of people. But there are 40,000 people in this community who I hear from all the time, who are very happy and very satisfied with the direction that the city is going. If I was hearing the majority of this city not liking every decision that we ever made, then I certainly wouldn't expect to get reelected if I decide to run for reelection. That would never happen. I mean, that's kind of anti-productive. Mm-hmm. So I get plenty of feedback that says, hey, you guys are doing a good job. So I understand there are a certain select group of people who are either frustrated, who don't like what we're doing, but that isn't a majority. They're loud, but that's not a majority. So to say that we're not listening to people, I think, is a false narrative, because we are listening to people, because there's 40,000 people that live here, not 150. And so I have no issues with anybody coming to this dais and talking and speaking. There isn't anybody in this community, with the exception of one person, who's asked to meet with me specifically, that I have not had a complete open door policy to talk to. I got a message last night at 11 o'clock. I'm meeting with a guy tomorrow at City Hall, right here for 5 o'clock tomorrow, because he had a concern about something. I'll meet with anybody, anytime, anywhere. There is so much misinformation on Facebook, though. There's not enough time in the day for me to monitor and correct all the misinformation that I read. And that gets frustrating, especially because I know if I try to correct some of the misinformation, I'm going to be met with the hostility and the personal attacks and everything else that never ever leads to a good discussion. I will always have good discussion, but being I'll just leave it at that. I'm always open for good discussion, and I've never turned anybody away from good discussion. So
well, I appreciate.
Matt, you said
real quick.
Quick,
Don, when you asked me today if I'd meet with you, how long did it take to get a response from me?
Not long.
I was at work. As soon as I saw your message, what was my response? Of course. Well, because I'll talk to anybody who wants to actually have a discussion, not an argument for the sake of argument, trying to get something over on somebody. And that is the politics in this town that has to stop. Everybody has to stop trying to get one over on somebody, or this is the same kind of crap that we're always gonna find ourselves.
I would agree with that statement.
Matt, you said you like politics.
I do.
And I can tell you that when I interviewed for this position, I looked up at the city council members that I was interviewing in front of, and I told them I don't care much for politics, and I really don't like politicians. Being on planning commission all those years, my thing was it's just a service to the city. You're here as a public servant. I
agree with that.
I don't like the political part of this, and if we didn't have an election coming up in November, I'm not sure that you would be seeing half